We'll get started because Councillor Barber has made the point that we're 2 minutes late from where he was given grace to. So the first agenda item is the board agenda. Councillor, yes.
Okay. So this is where it's
Yeah,
well,
I got confused because we're talking about the notice of the action list for
Yes.
motions, but the transfer station review is in that, and so you made a comment on that. and then-
yeah, I know. Apologies.
But
I
anyway,
get
go.
confused. Okay, so I just wondered whether people were interested in the idea of just having a discussion at some point about, do we want maximum number of terms that people can stay? You know, even if there's like a one-term break and then they could apply again, you know, just to allow for a bit more turnover.
For council,
No, for the committees,
for the
not for
committees.
council, no.
Well, the committees get done every 4 years.
So there's an opportunity there for,
Yeah, so
Okay.
next council comes on, they all get looked at again, so you're automatically off at the end of term and it gets re-looked at. Yep, or are you talking about or even the Mid-Range Heritage and Maritime, the committee members go to the end of council and then it all gets
and
done.
that's all done again.
Yeah.
But I
Correct me if
suppose
I'm
people,
wrong, is that you're talking about tenure though, so
Yeah,
in
in a way.
boards rather than in the
Mm.
council space, like government space. Generally you might have 3 terms of 3 years, and you
Mm.
might have a maximum tenure on the council, on the committee or the board, sorry, of 9 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's what I was thinking really, that it just allows for to turnover and other people can opportunities, I suppose.
I think it does turn over because it's every election
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
an unknown
yeah.
quantity.
Yeah.
And say I'm here for 4 terms and somebody says, oh, hang on, I'd love to go with that, they can come up with a good reason. The way that we've got our new code of practice is that everyone gets to put their name in the hat, you get your 3 minutes to talk, so.
And is that the same for the people who, the external, I'm not so much talking about us, because we have that rotation.
Yeah.
Inbuilt, perhaps thinking more about the experts from the
Yes.
community. I don't know whether
So
we have
council
people.
makes a decision on that, so when the next decision comes, council can decide if that person's been here too long, we don't want them anymore.
Okay. Okay,
But my concern is such a small region, that you had something say, you know, the audit committee, you can only do 2 terms, what if we don't get enough people to end up, then you're having someone that's not qualified.
yeah, that's sure. That's fine.
All right, any other yes?
Yeah, so I just wanted to raise something about the community transport. Like I said, I had conversation with Amy Shepherd recently, and she sent me an email. And so I know that this topic is on the forward agenda, but part of the email that she sent me is so under the current tendering system, which she's fairly confident the Taylor Bend Community Centre will be successful in their tendering for the state grant funding. So Red Cross did not tender, so it means that as of the end of this cycle, they will not be providing transport for people under the age of 65 in our region. They still have the funding for people over 65 until 2027, but not under 65. Because the over 65 is Commonwealth funding and the under 65 is state funding. So what she has suggested to me, and she's also approached other councils, is that if we as a council can advocate on their behalf when that comes up for tendering in 2027, so that they potentially will be looking after our whole district for under and over 65s. So there's no issue with people not knowing who to call to get transport. So yeah, I was just hoping to have that included in the forward agenda when we discuss the community transport next, about council advocating for the Taylor sector.
Yeah, so we'll, I don't know when it's on, but we'll include it in the briefing and then a report of government council, because the council would have to make that decision.
And that will be the next council.
Any others? No, we'll go on to the next item, which is Dave, update on the Swan Reach boat ramp and Duke Straits project.
There's a PowerPoint. This is just an update on Swan Reach and some discussions we've had at Swan Reach level, but just to give members an update of where we're at. The Duke and Straits project consisted of South Punaroo Swings, and all these projects are concept and design. So we're looking at South Punaroo Swings because that's the first place to get inundated with floodwaters. Swan Reach boat ramp, which is in concept design. The Bow Hill Riverfront, which we're tendered now and we're about to commence works. And as a supplementary project was the Scotts Creek Swims to try to floodproof those at the Duke and Straits project, which is at 80 gigalitres plus 300 mil of water level. As a follow-on, they're obviously seeking further funding commitment from council onto future projects, which they want to obviously have a rolling program. So what we've done is actually just indicatively put up the Blanchetown Boat Ramp, Page Drive, Morgan Riverfront and Arnold Park for bank stabilisation. And we may be able to accommodate those in some of the CRARP funding that we just received. But the idea is to actually put them up for funding because they're fully funded. With the Swan Reach boat ramp area, what we're doing is in concept design. You'll notice that we've got the bowling club there, and you've got the boat ramp in there, and limited car parking through the top.
I was just looking for the red dot on my screen.
Yeah, I can come up there and do it on the screen.
You do it.
Red dot. No, so looking at that, obviously you've got the single boat ramp there. You've got very limited parking through there, and the road access is coming in this way, around that way into the boat ramp and back out. There is a natural LPG gas line that runs through, or natural gas line that runs there, which limits our area. So what we're actually looking at doing is, I suppose, future-proofing Swan Reach for boat ramp use. So the concept. Sorry, I'm looking for the red dot again. So as it's stated there, there's only about 6. If we build the car park there for the boat ramp, it's only going to provide about 6 single car parks and 8 trailer parks. Now, we've been in discussion with Bowling Club because on a busy bowling club day or penance, they look for about 40 odd car parks as well. So there's a lot of conflict in that area. So what our concept design is working on is obviously in this area here. There is a boundary realignment from the building, which is very minimal, to just try to align the boundaries and the car parks around those 2 areas. We're looking at building car parking down that area too. And then having, I suppose, as a further expense and future-proofing the area is we're getting a design for a car park here in Len White Reserve, because a lot of people come in here, drop the boat, come back out here, park over here, and then basically have to spend the day.
Is that the existing car park?
That's the Len White car park, yeah. So formalising car park in that area, which will probably provide about another 28 singles and 25 trailer car parks. Now, we've been in discussion, I suppose there's been commentary for a long while about this block of land here. And the caravan park has probably intimated they want to buy it. The bowling club aren't interested in buying it, selling it at this stage. But we've been in discussions with them to say, if that was to become available and we were to enhance a project, and this could be 10, 20 years time to have the funding, or if we lump the due money and say a setback funding money and lump it all in a 2-year project, we wouldn't be funding anything. So we're just looking at what our proposals are for now. But looking at the due funding to do the majority of this, but then there's obviously setback opportunities as well. And looking at conversing those car parks to another 8 single and probably 19 car parks, with half of it being unsealed. Now, the reason why it would be unsealed is we have an SEP side entry pit right here, which actually disperses water onto the bowling club land. Now, the land value is probably equivalent to running a stormwater pipe from there all the way to the river. So it's probably better to actually have like a stormwater harvesting area there, which is currently there now, and then utilising that as I suppose a space for the stormwater, and then a car park area as well. So what we're trying to do is, I suppose, maximise the land that we have in Swan Reach to give us an extent into the future, so we don't lose car parking opportunities. And in discussions with the bowling club, they've been very supportive of this, as long as they get their car parking in there as well. So what I've actually asked them to do is I said I'd bring this to a briefing session, and if I get, I suppose, the concurrence in regards to it, putting it to them that we put a caveat on that block of land. It needs a land division to do it, But we put a caveat on there that we are first opportunities of buying that land, subject to the scope of works at the time when council want to do any work. So that if they ever do want to do a land division, make some money and then sell it, we actually have an opportunity to buy that land because it's not actually incorporated in our concept design at present. They've done. Driving shopping. Left-hand drive. So when you look at the car parking, that's the first car park we're looking at. Then there's a Len White formalised car park, and what they've done is another car park over here, which is where the stormwater area is for us, and then the caravan park is. And they're also, I suppose, intimated some parallel parking on that side there too. So all we're looking at doing is getting a concurrent, so I can go back to the bowling club so they can put it to their AGM. What we've done is,
Sorry, Dave.
sorry,
Carol, someone, thank you.
I'm a bit confused. Whose block of land is the one in the middle? Is that 2 blocks of land or?
which one? That one?
Bowling
No,
club.
here.
That is bowling club land. So all that area there, that's the bowling club.
Yeah.
And that's the open portion of land that theoretically they park on and throw the grass cuttings at present. And we
They
can still-
own that.
They own it. It's a sandpit, yes. Basically, it's probably lower than what the road level is going in. So obviously to try to disperse water, either I've got to run a rising main from there up to Mark's Landing or run a stormwater pipe back down that road. But if we had the opportunity of actually having, I suppose, an opportunity at a later date that we were open to buy it, then theoretically we've increased the parking capacity at Swan Reach.
The little white triangle is our land just for the stormwater.
That little white, that's still their land.
Oh,
That's still their land. That's only the conceptual overlay of the car park.
So that car park, if that became a car park there, would it provide adequate parking for the needs?
Yeah, basically, if I can just go to the next slide. So basically, site 1, which is down by the boat ramp, gives 6 single and 8 trailer parks. The Len White Reserve would provide for 28 singles and 25 trailers. And then the bowling club land, if we were going on there, gives 8 singles, which accommodates for the bowling club, and then another further 19 trailers. So in theory, there you're meeting the SADFAT requirements because they normally want 30 car parks per 1 ramp. So for double ramp, they want 60 car parks.
Has there been ever any discussion with the bowling club about relocating? I think there was years ago.
Not with the current membership.
Right.
We did actually raise that about opportunities in the future, and they basically said it'll stay a bowling club while there's still members there.
I was more looking at future flood proof. If it was located, say, for instance, up to the golf course or up the Oval precinct, I think that's education land.
Education,
isn't it?
yeah.
But then they would never have a problem with it getting flooded out.
Yeah.
Uh,
They did state that basically after a flood, they can come back pretty well, but that's why they're not a synthetic course.
No.
Because it's synthetic, if it gets too much moisture in it, they got to rip it all out and redo it. So that they have to leave it as that. So with the current membership, they were pretty keen to stay there.
Is there anywhere else in Swan Reach that the caravan park can extend to? Like my concern is we turn it into a car park. We're saying that that's a growth area, but we're actually stopping the growth of the caravan park. Or, I know our bridge needs to be looked at. Is there an opportunity to build a new bridge right near the boat ramp across the Glen Line? I know it's very expensive or whatever, but is it worth looking at other solutions?
A bridge, I suppose a bridge project for that's probably anywhere between about 2 to 3 million, because you've actually got to, if you want to demo the old bridge or build another bridge, you've got to have access and you won't get like now we've got flood recovery, semi-trailers going in there by their weight. And you wouldn't get the sweep path in there to get from the boat ramp area to get into that area.
I'm saying a new bridge.
Yeah, even if it was down in that area crossing there,
Yeah.
I don't think you get the sweep path to get into it. Because it's got a large drop off into the watercourse.
Yeah.
It would be fairly difficult, I would suggest, and that's I can only take that on notice.
That's my only concern. Like, I can see the value of having a car park there, but it does stop that any further development of that caravan park. And we're looking to grow and have tourism opportunities.
My discussion with them was they weren't entering into conversations with the owner of the caravan park. Because there is, I suppose, a level of encroachment on this fence line already between the two owners.
doesn't matter about who owns someone else's land.
So sorry, that land, oh, sorry, can you go back to that map? That triangular land that you're saying that's on the other side of where the potential of the third car park is, that is Caravan Park's land, that
That-
triangle,
That
yeah,
triangle there is Caravan
yeah,
Park, which is still being developed.
yeah.
Why would you redevelop something in a flood hole? It's- I mean, that place used to get flooded out on a heavy rain. Very bizarre.
So the process that we've gone through with the Swan Ridge Bowling Club Committee, the executive committee, is obviously they're aware of the land acquisition and where their building sits versus where their boundaries are. So they're aware of that land acquisition so that we can build in the car park. It's not a big one for us because it's not a big value of an acquisition. We've also taken into consideration their own parking requirements because they do bowling days, they do pennants, they do night hours. We've also looked at the option of site 3 for future growth, should council be in a position to want to go down that path. We could go down the path of actually lodging this as a total project with SADFAC and Jew. Therefore, then the project becomes externally funded. The issue we got is the stormwater is being dispersed on the land, so I'd have to deal with that at some stage. And I could have to deal with that now if they ask me to. Just looking at obviously talking with them to put a caveat on the land as a first option for sale if there was a land division. If we go down that path, we don't have to buy it. And then Bowling Club wish to table this at an AGM because they've actually shown support to it. So that they have to have a membership voting number to do it. They'd like to do it at an AGM. And I think their AGM is coming up very shortly. So we're just sort of tabling this idea to see if we can just work in partnership with the Bowling Club.
So do we as a council have a view on supporting people to stay in such a flood prone section of the town? Do you know what I mean? Do we have a view as a council on really in the long run, we'd love to see the bowling club move out of there, you know, so, and even the caravan park, you know, is it an area we would support in our growth strategy for further development?
Well, floodplain development is obviously got a number of challenges.
Yeah.
So not sure that we would support it or encourage it.
No.
But that's where a caravan park is going to want to be. Because they want access to the river.
Yeah.
And they're just making it future flood proof and that they can pick up their units and take them away.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So the consideration of how you manage the, look, ideally that's prime land where the bowling club is, and it might be, you get a brand new facility and it's up by the golf course, as Councillor Myers said, then that's probably a good result, but the club, because they own the land, it's not council land, it's a different conversation than normally happens when you've got, it on leasing, council land and you can potentially move them.
And I'm guessing they've probably weighed up the options of, you know, the views we've got while we're
Having a roll.
having a roll compared to once every 20 years we get flooded out.
Yeah.
So,
And I suppose as the state planning laws, like if they sort of said, no, you can't build it, well, then that's, it's to do with planning, but in planning, so say, well, yes, you can, but you have to abide by X, Y, Z. Yeah, that's the thing, it's where they come in.
Your insurance is a lot higher, obviously, as well, right? And their flood cover insurance would have gone up a lot after that last flood. My question is in regards to the car park there, because that would be a benefit to them. Like I say, they have night bowls at the moment. It's just a sand pit and they don't really have necessarily organised parking in that area. Could it be a situation that it's being partnership as they are private entity that own their own land to be engaged in the process too, where they're of benefit to have maybe bituminizing, whatever the word is, car parking, you know, made in that bit of land, but they could still maybe own that land, but be involved as partners in the project to come to the table for that section being made into car park for them and their benefits as well as for people accessing the river.
Yeah, the current concept is actually having part of that bituminized, so that area there would be bituminized and then and I'm pretty sure as part of that as well, but leaving that there as open space for the obviously the stormwater mitigation area.
But we wouldn't necessarily need to own that land for them to be involved as a partner in the project to want to have that as their car park
It
and.
might not get grant funding, because they could close it off at any time, say, no,
Oh,
it's
oh,
here.
yeah, it's ours, yeah, true that, true that.
And is the setback funding like specific that? Like the land, for the, I know they're specific in the number of car parks, so that was sort of. Like not a negotiable thing, but they don't want, like, if there was private land, they wouldn't give funding to do car park on private land, would that be correct?
That's correct, although we entered into an agreement with the towards at Mannum, that once it was built to council specifications, that we would take it over, and that's why we got funding as working with the principal owners.
Dave, what do you, so no decisions to be made here, so what are you looking for from?
In theory, basically, we want to be able to obviously build here, and the general pattern of flows is they would move from here around in like the Durban Park. And then that would provide more than adequate car parking for the short term, and I'm saying short term, 10 years. What I'm looking at doing is going back to the bowling club and just saying, here's what we're looking at doing. Would you please vote as to whether you want council to have a caveat on the land, so that if council did
Council doesn't
want
make a decision on that day.
No.
So, yeah, like, are you looking for whether there's general support? For us to
yes.
express that, or we need to have a report come.
Yep.
Back.
Yeah, but I suppose I'm just liaising with them at present, and that's all I've been doing is liaising with them.
So what are council's thoughts on the concept of what's being discussed?
It sounds like more parking's needed.
I have heard from people there that during the peak periods is a very busy boat ramp, so definitely definitely a worthy project, yeah.
The other comments?
I think bowling club land probably the way to go, because somehow I think if you're a boat owner launching at the ramp and then going all the way back around to Len White, a bit of a nightmare, I think. I don't know.
I mean, Len White Reserve is a nice setup for
Yeah.
the day trippers with their boats. And it's probably what, 200 to 300 meters
Yeah, it's not far.
downstream.
And they're parking here already.
Yeah, and I suppose what we're looking at is if people drop their boat off, then they've still got their things in their car, they drive around here and they've got kids in the car, that's where they go to. And you do get the day trippers that go there, like they might go out on a fishing day, and they might not be specifically going to Len White Reserve, they always park in this spot over here. During the weekdays, I'd say, but I haven't experienced for our weekends. But when the bowling club are there and they've got a tournament or a bowls day, they just say that the traffic movements are incredible through that whole area.
Yeah. Then you only got to throw in the Princess and pull them in at the same time.
Yeah.
Other thing, Len White has the toilets, so you know, after a big day out the boat, that's probably the first place you need to stop. To go to.
So I suppose the question is council open to the concept and happy for Dave to continue the conversations with the bowling club? But can't go to the bowling club and say council is supportive of this.
They could go and I suppose table the concept idea and vote on it.
And see if there's support.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, any other questions? No? Clive? Cemeteries and memorial policy.
Which one's the latest?
You're asking me?
Yes, I can, but it isn't here.
That's the rest.
Worried about what clubs are important to you.
We'll tell you if there's a red dot over there.
Okay, first of all, in the briefing notes, there was a link to the copy of the current cemeteries and memorials policy, and also there's a copy of the amended cemeteries and memorial policy was also was linked there. Basically, there's not that many alterations or proposed alterations, and I'll go over proposed ones. It's brief. Basically, there was no policy here prior to 2020, So that's just a response to a comment which was made early in the day. There was only a number of notes on some pieces of paper that I've found, like basically some procedures that in-house procedures. So there was nothing legally as far as the policy is concerned. Okay. So the policy is due in April 2025. It was adopted first on the 14th of July. And basically covers councils and victims in respect of owned and operated cemeteries under the Behavioural Standards Act and regulations. Then a policy was reviewed in April 2021. There was a few shortcomings, I suppose, once you put a new policy in action. There's obviously some gaps, so that's why there was a review 1 year later. Since the adoption, there's a number of identified changes, really being regarding memorials, grave depth we didn't have in there. We did have some details about the exhumation of the body and cremated remains and the interment of ashes within our own grave plots. So people, instead of putting ashes in the walls, we get requests where they want to put the ashes within a site already. So basically what they do is they dig a hole underneath the basis of the lease.
That's very common at Waikerie.
If the top is not, if there's no slab,
Yeah.
they can put it directly at the top.
Yeah, you gotta go down, because I've had to dig a few for my wife. You gotta go down and then at least 2 foot under the concrete.
Not involved.
Part-time grave digger, all righty.
Just verify any-
Done a few for my wife, yeah. They're gonna go for it.
So the changes within the policy, a bit more details, additional grade depth. This was added after response from Chris as the funeral director, and in conjunction with descriptions and standard depths for the different graves. So obviously, a document triple depth, obviously going to be deeper in the commencement of the digging before subsequent other burials can be included there. Just renaming the section to Memorial Gardens and Columbariums, previously memorials in each wall. So this reflects the change and what's written on our interment rights documentation. Cremated remains, 5 years ago when policy was first written, there was no anticipation that a number of requests of interment of cremated remains in the cemeteries. So we've actually just catered for those now in the policy. Surrender of interment rights, change to be made to system management of this process. I think it was only up to about probably 5 or 6 years ago, there was more complications in how a calculation is done, formed. And basically, if you surrender a right and haven't used it, you can actually get paid more money than you actually paid for it originally, depending on how much the lease is left and that future value of that money going forward. Assume a body and cremation remains. So we have had some just lately cremated remains. We've never had that catered in the policy, so now we place that in there. Memorials and memorial plaques. It's always been the policies just being highlighted. A lot of the changes minor and just really formatting and grammatically. So going on to now burials on private land. Parts of the policy is that we actually have disposal which is allowed on, which is not allowed. And you will see on rural land, why it says the rural land, because it's basically can't allow burial people in townships. So we received 2 instances in where I've had people come, obviously people that were here earlier, and also I had someone ring me once asking whether the council allows burial on properties. They were looking at purchase or thinking of purchasing a property within Mid-Murray Council. I said, sorry, the policy doesn't allow that. They said, no problem, I will go and buy property somewhere else. What I have had is I have had more than 2 phone calls of people ringing me saying, I have relatives that are buried on private property. How do I get access to it? And I said, sorry, you don't. I said previously, it was practice of the previous council to allow this. And proper steps or thoughts weren't put in place that allows you now to have a right to see those graves. And also because of, so I suppose the ultimate way you could put an easement there, and I'll go through the different situations, or you could have the grave site very close to the roadside to make it a requirement there, so people could visit it without trespassing possibly. And one lady rang me where she had actually granted permission for someone to come on to their property to look at whether it was great uncle or great grandfather. And she said, very much to her astonishment, she all of a sudden had multiple cars coming onto her property. She had people standing in the back of a ute, had a person with a walking frame trying to get over rocks to get to the front, to the gravesite, etc. So they basically nearly set up a family reunion. And she said, what can I do? I said, it's your private property. You need to look after your public liability. So going forward, as of these requests, so we gave a presentation on 28th of November 2023, and that was in relation to the same party of people coming to council previously. So this is basically the second time we did a presentation on their behalf. The legislation and council stance is that the practicality of it is not, it's not acceptable, I suppose. And that, I've done some investigations, and because of those previous people ringing me as well, it's quite, it puts me in a bit of a bad position. It puts council in a bad position because they've allowed that to occur. And then you've kind of got this legacy of people coming back to you all the time. So at the moment, we've got 15 cemetery facilities which operate, with another 11 closed. And we've taken, and some of those closed ones is where we've taken responsibility of closed churches, cemeteries, and churches, obviously, that doesn't no longer operate as well. Ashes are not considered human remains, so therefore there is no restrictions or authorisation required for interment on private property or on Crown land. So anyone, people ask me, can I take some ashes and scatter them on around reserve? I said, that's not a problem. Please don't throw them on top of anyone. So basically being discreet, and the people are very good. Allowing private burials would be an additional service which presently is not offered. Council is regularly contacted by relatives, as I've said, to access grave sites on private property. And it puts a bit of pressure on some of those people because they feel sympathetic about those, but they've also got to look after their own rights.
Is it worth getting, like those people this morning suggested, maybe getting some more info from Barossa Council, seeing they allow it to, how do they get around the things you've mentioned?
When I normally go to different sites, I can't remember what's going on to the Barossa site and try and find information, call them up, and they basically say, oh, we've got no documentation. Yeah, they talk about applications in their policy, and then they don't have an application form even.
And
So-
as per the email that I sent everyone that Clive sent me when we started getting, like Aristotle says we should, and council made the decision that we shouldn't be doing extra things. We're already looking after 15 cemeteries, like, is that enough? Our strategic plan says get back to core business, is this core business? All of our sustainability reports, like, for a very minority, and when there's is it extra issues? I just think we're asking our finance manager, who we're trying to get sustainability and for, all of these other things. So what is most important at this time?
So burial remains on private property is allowed, and it's by the permission of council, basically. Unless, so you can lawfully have an established cemetery or improved natural burial ground. Burial private property may be permitted only if the property is located outside of the metropolitan Adelaide or the township. As I said, it's going to be a rural area. there is some requirements as far as property size, but it's not that large a property. Burial and private property is subject to approval of the local council authority, and the Attorney General can give them their permission. So they are, my understanding that they approached, they sent me quite a forceful letter and saying, we'll be undertaking all legal aspects and we'll be, going to the Attorney General.
Can the Attorney General override?
They can if they want
Yeah,
to, but they've said, no, go and see your council.
Yeah.
So, obviously they don't want to be taken away from their core duties as well. And obviously the burial is still required by the burial cremations regulations. Under the Act, the environmental health officer must visit the intended site prior, and my understanding is after, to ensure that the body was actually put into the area that they had previously approved. There may be contact with the Environmental Protection Authority in relation to if there's any type of water course nearby. Each burial on private land, a GPS coordinate must be added to the title of the property. And then I'm just going to add on back there, if council did decide to do that, other conditions that council may require. So if obviously the council said, oh, we need an easement there, then that would be another cost associated. So and then the question is, what happens if the property is subsequently sold? The site of burial has got the status of cemetery. There's no preservation rights or visitation rights. So a new owner can desecrate the grave site. There's no protection on there. Just as you said previously, you could have a shed on there. You could, they could revert it back into the orchard, like, the flower over, put a crop in there, whatever. Subsequently, the owners of the land are not obligated to preserve the plot and may choose to build over the plot and make negative alterations. Subsequent owner with approved from the Attorney General may exhume the body or request it to be done as a condition of the sale.
So if that's happened on the land that you own, are you obliged to let people know if they want to buy it? That this has happened?
I would imagine
Well,
that's
that's the same
something
with the
that-
GPS.
Put it on the title.
It's on the title.
It's on the title.
It should be a
The
GPS
same as,
site.
yeah, there's a burial here.
And
Um,
part of the sale contract is the title, so.
Noting that I'm not sure when that requirement came in, so that might have only came in 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But you'd think that you'd want to disclose that, like the real estate.
I'd have to.
Like to disclose that.
It's got a lot of people, isn't it, burials?
Okay, risk councils, council managers and other cemeteries. As I've said 15 previously, there are no guarantees that the future descendants will not turn to council to assist to access the property. They've done that. I've received calls. Subsequent owners may request assistance with removal of the sites. Well, my response would be, I'm sorry, you brought that with a grave site on there. And whether there's expectations of council to maintain those sites or access to the sites, well, I suppose that's been some people have come to council and said you must have there must be some law, you must have some legal things, and I basically say no, sorry. Noting property owners may not welcome human remains being buried on the areas adjacent to the boundaries or having memorials visible from their property. And the last one, which is an interesting one, what happens if we actually end up sell property under the Section 180?
Full of everything.
Yeah.
What can we do? Where to allow burials on private land, following should be considered, all costs and legal requirements of the responsibility of the person requesting the burial. Majority of the other councils have an administration fee of about $1,000. I think that's about the fee of the Murray Bridge. Once again, I don't think they have an application all on their side, even though they say
And
that.
they don't have 6,000 square kilometres, so the EHO is based here, but might have to go 2 visits right to the end of our council area.
Yeah, so we could put the size and the location of the land holding, so the size of the land holding and where the gravesite is, so you can't see it from the border, etc. Or we could actually have like the landowners have easement to the location of the burial added to the title prior to the authority given of the burial. Consider only allowing burial adjacent to the fence line, but then that goes against, that's very visual for possibly the general public and probably the neighbours. You could have a land management agreement that sets out the burial area, how to be managed and by whom, but then as council is part of that, then we would be party to enforce it. We could possibly have to take people to court to enforce the LMA. Application for change of land use, if more than one body is to be interred at the burial site, that's a common thing where other councils allow it to happen. They'll only allow one, and then once it comes to the second one, they say, "Oh, we need a change of land use for it," because we don't go any further than that. Needs to be stressed from the outset that not all property is suited for burial, and a select burial site may not also be suitable because of what I've said before, like the EPA forces and size of the land, and it's got to be on rural. And once again, I'll just enforce that scattering of cremation that remains are not subject to the same legal requirement because it's not deemed to be a basic body that's cremated. So if council decides to allow burial on private land, no authority should be given until policy procedure is prepared and adopted by council. So questions?
That's something I'd like to say in regards to it, yes. So I think a solution that could be found, a lot of people are now looking forward to more environmental burial solutions, which it seems like this couple that did their deputation this morning suggested of the natural burials. And obviously there's a lot of energy, and I agree with cremation, you know, it's something we've all gone for in an idea, thinking it's, you know, better than maybe being buried for some people, but then it is the environmental impacts of cremations and the gas and the energy that's used to do that. I've done a lot of personal inquiries into natural burials and where you can do natural burials where it is just like covered in loincloth and you're not embalmed, a tree is planted over your head, you know, there is no plaque. There's certain cemeteries in Adelaide that do it, and SA is in fact one of the only states in Australia that offers certain cemeteries specifically for natural burials, where there's like an oak forest, or you can be in a native forest and you can choose what kind of tree you want planted on top of you and all of that. And so I think people that often want to be buried on their own land have that idea of, I'm not religious, or I don't want to be in a cemetery and I want a natural burial. I don't necessarily believe in cremation. And then you comes this solution in your own mind of let's get buried on our own lands, which I do think has a lot of problems after the sale of the land and all of that. But I feel like we had in our policy there that we are allowing for natural burials, but we don't have any sites necessarily dedicated to that process of our cemeteries, of which we have quite a few. And I just thought it could be a great thing for us to look into adapting one of our cemeteries, or I don't know which one, or would be in regards to a feedback from you guys of which one would be suitable, to actually be one that's sort of advised as a natural burial site, that others who want to be buried in a natural way can feel like, well, I may not be religious, but this cemetery here in Black Hill or wherever it is, a nice pretty one in the country, can be where I can have a natural burial and I can be part of something that others are also caring for the environment, will then be there too. And it gives that idea of, well, we are listening to the idea that you maybe don't want to be buried in Mannum Cemetery, and you may not want to be cremated, you may want to have a natural burial, but on your property is not necessarily the greatest thinking around that natural burial. And I think if we created a space or a cemetery where we encourage natural burials, it could then be a really great selling point for our region too, for people that do want to have natural burials, to be like, I don't have to have it in the city. There's one in Elizabeth, I think, and there's one somewhere in the Barossa as well, and I'm Lyndoch, I think, has one, and Elizabeth. And for me, in my own inquiries, I was like, well, I don't necessarily have any connection to Elizabeth or Lyndoch to be wanting to go out to be a natural burial far away from my community. So if there was one that was established in Mid-Murray, I think we'd see more people in this region thinking, well, yes, I'd like the idea of having a tree planted on top of me and just going back into the soil. And then it isn't a situation of things being exhumed or a grave site that's being maintained or having to be responsibility of council. It's just a forest, and it gives beautification of our cemeteries. So we're talking about beautifying our cemeteries, and maybe some tree planting is part of that. But I think having an actual designated cemetery that is encouraging natural burials could be finding an adequate solution to those people that are looking at the home burial for that reason. I want to be on country and I want to be in the bush. And that's what I really heard from their talk this morning, was they went to a natural burial that they really loved, of them just being wrapped in some fabric and a tree planted on top of them. They kind of said that's what they expected would happen to their in end, would be that there'd be trees on top of them. Once we allow private burial, we don't know what they're going to do, and so then we don't know if that's the process they would actually go with, as opposed to a graveside and tombstone and traditional concepts. But I just thought it'd be something we could consider within this policy of actually maybe encouraging a certain, maybe not Mannum, maybe a country one that has the room for a bit of native re-veg around the cemetery or whatever. For the idea of allowing natural burials and encouraging that as a solution to people that want to be buried at home, to be like, we do offer natural ceremonies, services.
I like the idea, but I'd like to know how much resourcing we've got spare to do that. We've got all these other things in our strategic plan. Is it something that we have time or resources to look at now? Or is it something we could add down the track, when we're back on track, sustainable council? I just feel like we're putting a lot of resource into when we haven't, we need to make decisions in the best interest of the public, not the entire.
Right. Well, I think it's got merit.
Yeah.
So maybe it's part of consideration whether there's demand for it. And so if we did a piece and asked for community feedback on it, to say, this is something that we are interested in or would be something attractive to it, and that would give us an idea rather than going off and going down the path without having some data.
Yes.
Ask those people as well, because they seem pretty set on they want it on their property, so that might not actually be a solution for them.
But yeah, I think it's, in my opinion, is worth exploring.
Yeah.
But testing it with the market, so to speak, to see whether there is, because Swan's fair point is people may, I was gonna say dead set, on just being there on their own land versus the concept you've talked about, but then there may be people that think that's.
I think there's a lot of people that, it is a movement moving forward in that area of people in Australia that aren't religious, that are wanting natural burials, especially First Nations people, to be able to go back to be buried naturally on lands, like how their ancestors were. So there's definitely an interest there within First Nations groups, but then also just hippies, that just want to be like, I just want to be a tree and I don't want anyone to have to care for my gravesite 100 years after I've gone, and it's that feeling and mentality that a lot of people have now around this new movement of natural cemeteries and natural burials. And I think it's worth maybe exploring, but
I think we'll give it some, we'll explore it, as part of the concept.
I think the whole aspect, or what you said's got merit. But at the end of the day, there is state legislation in place that doesn't matter where you get buried, or if we change the policy to use your own land or whatever, you still must have a funeral director. And those people this morning realise that. Because you can't just have people out there willy-nilly digging holes.
No.
Parking.
no.
That's called serial.
And when it comes to the,
How you bury your dog.
when it comes to the point of your forest of trees. If it's on council land, then councils, it's like another park. They're still gotta mow the lawn.
And still
They've
gotta
still
water
gotta
them
do
and-
the irrigation.
And it's all part of the fees they pay in those processes
Yeah.
of having the natural burials.
Has there actually been an inquiry?
Yeah, so there, I think maybe first of all, a bit of an investigation, because I imagine there's various different degrees of natural burial. So that could be right from the start of still having a normal plot in a cemetery, but the method that they're being buried in, not the normal wooden cast. So right to the extent of having like a natural forest or natural forest surrounding. That would be the nth degree. So maybe we can just do some investigations about that and see how that could fit in within scope of our possibly our current cemeteries, and how we could implement it or slowly incrementally go towards in that direction.
But there is a solution for those people this morning. There is an exemption that can be applied through the Attorney General without council having to do anything. They can still have a solution to their problem.
And I'm not 100% sure that they'll get permission anyway, knowing where they live.
So
It's in proximity to a watercourse, which hasn't seen water for donkey's years, but
One day.
well, it's the only dog keeping.
You know what that is?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We want a date.
and another thing is, how many councils don't allow home burial?
That's what my question is, councillor Schultz is, I'd be interested in, how many regional are there?
Yeah, and the Barossa is sustainable. We're not.
Yeah.
So that's the question, and I've been talking about what processes would be involved in that, and it doesn't seem like many councils have processes that I'd encourage them to go. And then the costs that are charged, because great on the Barossa Council, if that's the case, they don't charge anything, because there's definitely council costs associated with it.
And our EHO is already, got too much work. Look, I know last time we got a report on the health checks, we're about 300 behind. So do we want extra work when we don't have the resources?
So can I ask a question maybe so it's coincidental that we're reviewing, because that was the timeline when we need to review the policies live. Obviously it's topical, given the deputation this morning. We will present back to council a report, that considers the policy for adoption, and any changes that have been made as apply that life. Is there any thoughts that you want to share on the, potential of burials on private land for us to consider in that report?
Yeah, I just think, just trying to remember back to when it was brought to us last term of council. And that's when we didn't have the unsustainability lens and stuff like that. But our council area was so big, and it's like the onus of getting out there. And I know the people who presented this morning, it's their little bit of land there, but it could be anywhere in Mid-Rose. If we sort of change the policy to agree to this, it could be anywhere within our council area, and that's the concern. And even if we put a figure on it, people aren't prepared obviously to pay what figure we put on it. So it's sort of, that was just a case in point. So like, even if we put that figure on and we allowed it, they would not want to pay that. So
Even the deputation this morning, we had
Yeah.
indication that they were happy with
absolutely,
that sort of thing.
absolutely. And so I just think it's still, there's too much of a risk with doing that. And I think that was the decision back last term of council when we got the policy. And and I can't still see any reason to change that. There's nothing.
I'm not against it, but I think there's too many other things
On our.
added on.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, you go down Halfway House Road, and is it Sandleton or whatever, the old
Yes.
old church?
Yeah.
I mean, that's all privately owned, including the cemetery.
Yeah.
So you might have all heap of relics all buried in there, but, and you want to go and see them, but you've actually got to get permission from the owner of that place, to, and
I don't want to put words in middle of mouths, but
Yeah.
it seems like there's a general consensus, obviously exploring natural burials, you hear that, but that maybe there's not support for us to change our policy, but please, if anyone that hasn't spoken has a difference of opinion, please let us know. Obviously, that decision will be made when Clive brings back the report. But if there was a strong sense that you wanted the report for the policy to change, we would do that prior, and then you would consider that. Versus that there's not a lot of support for the change in the policy.
I mean, you could go down the path of doing your policy and somewhere in it, the natural burial part, you just explain that you can go to the Attorney General and get an exemption and leave it at that.
Be clear in the policy.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
Just my understanding of Attorney General giving using his rights is only the only instance I know is when like during floods where Indigenous grave sites have been uncovered, where he actually allows them to be replaced back onto ground. So that's the only time I understand he uses his powers.
When you're in a cemetery, there's a 100-year leasehold, or there's a fee and charge with all of that. There's a lot more than whatever this $2,000 was for private land, and that is for council's maintenance and upkeep of that site. But you don't ever own your site. It's a leasehold for a time that then a relative will then continue to pay long after you're gone if they want to keep you there. Whereas when you're on private land, it's like this $2,000 or whatever it was, 1,000 or two. It's like this one-time deal, and then never again. It's like it's just going to be there until it's someone else's problem. And essentially, they didn't have a solution today of what the problem would be after their next generation passes. So it is a problem left in the future for others to
And
deal
if you
with.
want to, and also if you want to be there, then you do have the option of cremation. If you want to scatter your ashes on land you own
So
or whatever.
mindful, sorry, Councillor Schultz.
But there's a difference between church cemeteries and public cemeteries. Church cemeteries, basically, that's your plot. or
Like,
ever.
oh, ever,
It
okay,
doesn't,
Yeah.
yeah.
it doesn't end
You
the
just, you just
date.
make sure your cemetery is next to some farming land, so you can buy some more farming land off the farmer if need be to extend the
Expand.
cemetery.
Yeah,
But yeah, the church cemeteries, that's your place ever.
Right,
You go
okay.
down to Centennial Park, a big one in Adelaide,
No,
and I
yeah.
think you're down at 25 years.
I heard
Yeah.
You
that
gotta
too, and I
renew.
thought.
Yeah, it's a lot less now.
Yeah, my father's there, but that, because he was a service,
Hmm,
there's an
They're fair.
exemption through
Yeah.
Commonwealth on that.
yeah, my granddad said too.
Yeah.
So, mindful of time, actually, where's the deal now, but is that the general consensus that the policy not to change in this relation, some exploration on natural burials,
There's a
and
part in the policy that says, well, no dedicated natural burial site is available in Mid-Murray area. Natural burials can be undertaken at all Mid-Murray cemeteries.
At all of them, yeah, I saw that in the policy, yeah, so I was like, we already offer that anyway. So that's why I thought, well, maybe we could just advise people when they do apply for these things, that you know that we offer the alternative of you having a funeral director that can go through the process of doing a natural burial on one of our sites. But I mean, it's always really nice if you make it so it's a dedicated area, for then when it does become a popular alternative for people, that then it is sort of a planned mapped site that's going to be dedicated to that treescape, you know, but.
Not
What
a
it-
council, but Birdwood has that.
We do too, no?
Yeah, we allow it. So, I mean, I think it's been passed by federal law now, you can do it anywhere, but it requires certain funeral directors that are gonna go through that process and know it intimately, and it's a
And that's
different
their
level.
business.
Yeah.
That's their business,
Our
exactly, it's not our business, yes.
okay, so look, we're at an hour for the briefing, if I add up, obviously, there are any indicative times for it, we've still probably got another hour to go, subject to how long those conversations go for. So do you want to take a break and have some lunch for half an hour? Or do you want to do that and then work through lunch as well? All right, so Clive, next on the agenda
Their favourite thing.
is our budget growth and valuation changes. Is it ready to go for you? About thing? It's ready.
Yeah, this is.
But this will be a quick one.
A quick one.
This last week.
This is wrong topics.
Not as much as it used to.
Coming as well.
Okay, as every year, we get basically the main file gets updated, as far as valuations or future valuations for the new financial year. From this point onwards, there'll be some minor adjustments where they do revisits where there's kind of like buildings half finished and then they make some minor adjustments. But basically, all in all, these are pretty well the final figures that we'll be breaking on as far as valuations are concerned. So just a quick graph. So the green shows the growth by each land use. So for residential 0.06, that's within each category, obviously. Commercial 0.34 with growth. Industry, there was some properties removed from that category, and I'm not sure where they got dispersed. I think it might have got dispersed to vacant land. From reduction growth 0.3, and new assessments or new development on the properties. Growth is vacant land. Obviously, there's some new allotments created there, and others. And other is really anything that doesn't fit into the other categories. So things such as, we would have like water reserves, old quarries, forestry reserves or native bushlands, etc. So
Cemeteries.
possible cemeteries, cemeteries, and last one is marine verse. So when we look at revaluation, so obviously as far as like the normal increases, the residential's increased by 10.27%, and we'll look at which regions are affected later on. Commercials about the same. Industries had a 3%, from production nearly at 5% as far as increases of land values. Vacant land's gone up by over 10% and others about nearly 8%. So if you want to have, this is basically the table which breaks the graph. So basically it's exactly the same. Those figures we talked about before. Basically, if you're, one of the trillionaires in America, you could have bought the council area for 4.3 trillion and then 4.7 trillion is our new valuation. The top 10 localities by dollar growth. So this is where new development, whether it's buildings or new assessments. Obviously, Mannum increased by 13.3 million, which is nearly 1.5%. And then I've got the other 9 ones going by the dollar values there. So, and then on the right hand side, I've got the 10 localities by so the first, the growth, like the new assessments, building activities, and then this is just by the increase of Mannum. Just going to see what that figure is in the top right corner, which is just given a bit. Mannum, that top right corner figure there is 8.91%. Yeah.
So what caused the growth in EBIT?
Sorry, growth
In EBIT?
There would have been either like a subdivision, so you have more assessments, or you could actually have someone's built a house on there or something like that, or a building, or that could be farming land, it could be a large shed infrastructure, same industry. So, but it's only 137,000, not going to do very much to sway that amount.
Even never pops up.
Okay.
That means your rate's gonna go.
So that's all pretty straightforward. I suppose just to say that, it was Swan Reach, second top on the left-hand side there by nearly 1.3 million. Which is quite surprising.
So when you look at Swan Reach and that money, does that take in Mark's Landing as well?
No, that'd be separately, pretty sure.
If Port Mannum separate, I think Mark's Landing would be separate.
No, I can.
And within the surrounding of Mannum, is that including obviously Kalwira, Pondick? No, they're
No, that's
not
separate.
even
Even Port-
they're not even the top 10.
Port of Mannum is a separate
Yeah.
locality as well.
Yeah, they're all separate, okay.
So Swan Reach, that amount of money, that would be like what John George has developed down there.
Yeah.
So yeah. So then if we look by a percentage, obviously Mannum still comes up with 1.5% on Pluta, Swan Reach, and quarter line. So yeah. So that's relative growth compared to what they had previously. Then if you look at where the increases have been as far as just a revaluation is concerned, so these are two parts. So you have the growth component and you have the revaluation component, which gives you the total increase when you do your valuation. So Port of Morgan's 25% increase. And that's per property that equates to 110,000 per property on average. Yeah, so that's quite interesting, just have those. So what I've done is I've just done a couple of slides which are related to kind of budget. I've got a number of early indications of percentage increase of rates, and it's probably quite distinctive that there's a number which are quite high and a number which are quite low. the main difference is whether the council's been, there are some sustainable or unsustainable, and they're obviously trying to increase some of their rates for them unsustainable. My house is in Tea Tree Gully. They're sustainable when they got 4.5% increase. I'm not happy.
Go and touch their numbers.
Right.
Thanks, Clive.
I hope you write in when they put their own 10-year business plan.
Got a place in, Midmurray as well. They're the only ones that have released them. sort of
No,
indicating-
this is just through my network, so these are basically very unofficial.
Yeah, people are
percentages.
working through
It's-
the process at the
it's
moment.
me just talking to other financial managers and they're saying, well, we think it's going to be about this percentage at this stage, so, and then just in comparison, I suppose, the RBA CPI forecasts, which were released in February, for this financial year, 2.4%, next financial year, 3.2, then 2.7. And those, the main increase, why do you think, like you think the economy's slowing down? Why is it 3.2% increasing next year? And that's because electricity, when these figures were done, electricity was coming off. I think they've extended it a little bit. We'll talk about extending it. Depends if we win the election or not. You get a cookie if our party wins. So basically, the 2.4% is probably like reduced by a fair factor because of electricity, and that's why we've actually kind of got this increase, kind of peak going off. So you've got electricity coming off, and then in 2027, they expect the inflation to go down. So if you didn't have the electricity there would be those figures would be slanting down. All three figures would be reducing. So it's again a bit of smoke and mirrors because of the what the government's done to manipulate the CPI. And the next one, I look at this on a regular basis to do my long-term financial plans and do the budgeting. This anyone can look at this. This is given on by the Australian Stock Exchange on a daily basis, and it gives you the 30-day interbank cash rate futures. So this is where different banks are actually lending money to different other bodies and vice versa. So as far as interest rates concerned, in 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, in seven months, the market's basically factored in a whole 1% decrease from what we've got at the moment. And then going forward, and obviously this changes, but I just thought that was interest. So,
And it's as of yesterday.
yeah. So, today's will be only given that to close it today. Yeah. So, so basically that kind of flows in with, the CPI decreasing over a long period of time. So,
Depending on what happens with tariffs tomorrow or next week. And
yeah, that's right. And what announcements maybe or may
And
not
it
be
gets
made.
into the government.
Yeah, I'm
How
going
much
to.
money they spend.
So probably just going back, we'll go back, whoops, to the first one there. So basically, you have these fluctuations. You see these fluctuations, from different land groups as far as revaluations. One area, one group will go up, like residential go up, and then basically the next month, next year, it may, it hasn't peaked again. It's, then you might actually have profit reduction or something else peaking instead. It's not very common that all the land groups increase and decrease. And if you try and change the rate of the dollar to suit that, you can just basically chasing your tail because you're getting away from the fundamental principle of it's council rates is a tax. That's a tax on the value of your property. And council, when they did their last rate review, they decided to have the rate of the dollar 10% lower from producers, and all the rest at the same level. So that's probably all I've got to say at this stage, unless someone's got any questions.
Probably not even to do with this. When I was doing my work last year, working out the comparison rates for all of the councils, I noticed that a lot of councils have a higher vacant land rate than 100%. I know we did the review probably about 4 years ago, and we're probably not due for another 4 years. That's something council can change without one of those full reviews, because if we're looking towards growth and to push that, we've got all this vacant land, they should be paying more so that we're encouraging them to build and then they get a cheaper rate.
So a lot of councils have seen, and I've been up the councils where you've got a developed township, so like I was previously at Balaclava, because you go through there and people say, can't buy a block of land in Balaclava, and you drive through and you think, well, there's plenty of blocks of land here, like, but there's no for sale signs. So what happens is people either, it's deemed to be adjoining property, or it's at the same rate in dollar, so why not keep it? People may purchase vacant land or the superannuation. It's not bad, especially if you had bought some blocks of land near the river at least several years ago. Be quite good for your superannuation, and they call this land banking. So people just bank it, basically put it away and say that's going to yield good increases for me. And when I retire in 15 years' time, when I need that money, I'll sell it. So to counter that, there's quite a lot of councils which have said, well, we don't want land banking. We want all our blocks developed, especially in townships. And so in townships, if there's a vacant piece of land, it's vacant. If you've got a large piece of land out in the rural area, it's prime production, basically, unless it's very, very small land. But even if it's a very small block of land and it's owned by a farmer, it would be deemed to be prime production.
What would you class as a very small block?
Oh, a house block.
All right.
So
But there still would be an argument if there's no fence on it or anything. Usually, if they're farming it, they could object and say, we want it to be prime production, and we would say, yes.
So can council change that rating without going through that whole rating review, like just for vacant land?
Yes, council can change it, but not without public consultation if it's deemed to be a material change in the way you're rating.
Yeah.
And I think you would have to.
Yeah, so we could change our rating policy, we'd have to consult on it.
Yeah.
Given this would be a material change.
There could be the argument if you only changed it very slightly, but if you only change it very slightly, it's not going to do anything.
Most of them are 150%.
Yeah.
Like your farmers are 80 or 90, and then your
Yeah.
vacant land was about
That's right.
150, and then most of the others seem to have about 100% for everything.
Yeah, like you'll find that probably the more councils, the density of the councils are, the more they will say, oh, we don't want vacant land, we want, because they might be medium density housing anyway. They will really hit vacant land really, really high. It might be 200 or 250%. I think Adelaide City Council is something extreme. It's at least doubled.
And a lot of them probably deemed as vacant, but they've got what they call shipping containers and caravans and things like that. So they're actually using it to live on, and we're not getting the rate that we should be.
You're adding the land.
Yeah, that's right. Things, yeah.
And I'm guessing with everything that's going on in America at the moment and with us having a federal election, it's going to be quite hard to predict exactly what's going to happen for setting the budget at this point in time.
Like the projected CPI could change. Suppose when they looked at our council, we said we had the process we did, we used the CPI from the February RBA, and then in May, which is the time when we are going into public consultation, the RBA releases another set of CPI, and we were criticised for not, when we're adopting rates, to update our projections from the latest CPI. That, taking into context, in that time, the years leading up, and we were in the first round of SCOSA, the CPI was increasing. So they were saying, well, you're undershooting when you're budgeting. If you've taken a principle on, raising rates plus whatever, or CPI, whatever, it was based on CPI, and you didn't review it when you had later figures come out. And look, it can work both ways. The revised May 1 could be lower, could be higher. I don't know. And as far as America's concerned, it's not so basically, between 5 and 10% of our exports go to America. So it's not the direct, it's the indirect effect of they are partners and what may or may not happen in the future. Basically, the problem happening at the moment is because, business likes certainty and they're not getting certainty from America. So everyone's on the edge, basically.
Any other questions? So next steps for the budget process, Clive?
Yep, so in the background, we've been doing the March budget review, and then we use the March budget review to do the forecasts going forwards. I'll pick up the CPI from obviously from February. That's the latest one we've got. Won't use any state or federal CPIs because they always undershoot for some reason. And I'll do my plan. I'll work out basically what the gap is to try and get reach our sustainability in 2 years, which is the current year that we've been looking at, and then forecast my CPI plus whatever needs to occur based on that.
Any questions? So we have another briefing, Audit Risk Committee in May.
Yep.
And that's where it'll go.
Yeah, so with council want to have a look at some initial modelling in the last week.
29th.
Last week, yeah, on the 29th.
So we'll probably, have a briefing, that one will be virtual one.
Yeah.
So mid-month briefing, where Clive will do some modelling, then finalising that week for a draft to go for consideration for the Audit Risk Committee at May
7th, I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it'll come to council following that.
And that's depending on recommendation of the Audit Risk Committee, and then council will consider it, whether they want to, whatever the Audit Risk Committee get and whatever they recommend, and be up to council whether they want to move on that or have some other alterations to what they want to get out of public consultation. And that's what it is. It's just a public consultation. And in all other years, we've gone out to public consultation. In June, we've considered the public consultation which has been received. We don't rush into a decision. We adopt our budget in July. So we don't rush into these decisions, and there's plenty of time to reflect or ask management staff for further information.
Nothing else? Thank you, Clive. So the next item is the meeting room here in Mannum's functionality and potential safety upgrades. As you're aware, this report's been posed a couple of times and given questions that have come out of it and discussion items. It was felt prudent to have a discussion in the briefing. Unfortunately, I haven't had time to do a presentation, but I'll run through some information and then we'll have a discussion on the item. I think first and foremost, I want to point out that this is about making this room fit for purpose for multiple uses, whether that be council meetings, committee meetings, citizenship ceremonies, Australia Day morning teas, public meetings, and also potentially looking to maximise the use of it for external users and hire. So it's not just about a council meeting, but that is the most significant meeting that we do have here. And from a risk assessment perspective, creates some risks associated with that. As you know, I have WHS legislative obligations and requirements to ensure the safety of staff and elected members. And under the Work Safety Act, council has a duty of care to ensure, so far as reasonably practical, that workers and other people are not exposed to health, with psychological health and safety risks associated with working or undertaking work for council. So we've done a risk assessment, and that's highlighted a number of issues, as well as issues that are not associated necessarily with the risk assessment, but also if we want to use this in multiple different scenarios. So in no priority order issues that are identified with this. And sorry, I should have said at the start, this is historic. So I'm not sure when this meeting room was built, but for whatever reason, it was.
Everyone would know.
When was it?
When was it built? Is it 10 years old?
Yeah.
2008, 2007.
Probably considered that the risk and the issue at our other offices, the meeting rooms, sorry, are all external to the offices. Whereas this one is an external meeting room in the general office space. So I don't want to criticise, but thinking about the use of this facility, if it wasn't as part of the office space, it probably would have alleviated some of the issues that are addressed by that. As you know, Canberra is separate to the office space and Morgan is separate to the office space as well.
If this room was actually just against that side of the building, it would have been
Fine.
fine.
So
What were they thinking?
the office is here and that, so we've got what we've got. So public access to general office area is obviously an issue. As you know, we've got offices all around. The toilet facilities, there's no public toilet facilities, so the toilet facilities inside the building as well. There's only one single point of entry to this room, and to the meeting room, which is through there, which obviously from an egress perspective creates some risks. There's a lack of confidentiality from certain meetings, including council meeting. This sliding door is not confidential at all. The room's set up, so it's not conducive. You see, we're full complement today. Not only from a council meeting, but for multiple uses, whether that be a staff meeting or a progress association, having flexibility with a large table, cupboards on this side, the length and the width of the room creates some challenges as well. And then IT and tables and chairs are also create some issues. Chairs are quite large, they're quite old, so it limits the number of people that can sit around here as well. So we've done some investigations. The working group was set up, and Clive jump in at any time as well. A working group was set up to come up with some solutions to deal with those issues. Again, about making it a multi-use facility for multiple purposes across whatever it could be used for. And so they came up with some solutions to deal with those issues. And we went out and got some projections on what that looks like. Those solutions are entry point on this side of the building, which we use, given the weather here. You would have what's called a door lock or something like that.
Like an airlock, basically.
An airlock. So if you just have a door straight out, that would create some challenges. Having that as a lockable door, and so public access would come in from outside of the building. And that allows, for example, if you wanted to have external users, previously we'd have progress associations and staff member would have to stay, and like Upper would give a key to the mayor or something like that. So if you had access that was able to come in and out of this building, outside of here, that would create an opportunity. If there was an issue where there was a public disturbance or an issue, we could evacuate the staff, elected members, groups, or whoever it is, into a secure area through that door, because it would have fob access. We would look at potentially having removable tables and chairs, so that you're not stuck in this setup. You can have a U shape for council meetings. You can have small meeting tables if you want to have a greater workshop set up. So flexibility around that. It could be used as hot desks if required, if it's not being used from a meeting room perspective as well. So then that equates to different IT and technology would be required, and a setup for a screen rather than the portable screens. And I'm just giving you a snapshot, Clive. Is there anything I've missed in that?
Probably the so one of the principal thing is we've only got one entry and exit point. So if there was a fire or whatever, we wouldn't be able to go from here. We'd have to try and smash our way through the kitchen. You wouldn't be able to smash those doors. Other windows that one of the staff call them suicide windows. They're basically unbreakable. So not only
That's when they want to get away from a staff meeting and they want to
so not,
They've tried.
and it was identified as the other meeting room at Canberra 2 is lacking another exit one as well. So so probably the basic flaw in both of those is we need to exit points. One could be an emergency one. So we looked at Canberra and that needs that can have just a push bar door, and if that needs to be used, that would be in the corner near the swimming pool. They can be just used and pushed out because there's a part there and it's quite accessible.
Doesn't necessarily take you to a safe space like Ben was talking about.
Obviously, the swimming pool area.
Or public area, you know, like
Yeah.
they could have people outside waiting for you.
Could, as they could, well, no, yeah, because it would be,
Yeah.
But yeah, if there was a fire, you would want another, a separate place to
Yeah.
move from, so.
hopefully there's not another fire waiting for us, but there's, you know, if it was it was a simple disturbance,
Yeah.
take your point. So that's basically the overview of the project.
Yep.
So we've had some costs, and these are estimate costs. So building modification with what has been projected, is around 100 grand. That includes a 20% contingency, $14,000 for the replacement tables and chairs. Audio visual equipment are around 37,000, so about $150,000 project that would make it multiple use.
So what we've looked at, so then we've looked at what budget's available, and what we've got is, as far as we have got a building maintenance budget, and approximately about $32,000 sourced from the building maintenance budget, so that's no budget required, no budget adjustment required there. With our IT, because we were rather well prepared for COVID, we actually had audiovisual equipment here. It was one of those things where council was in front of the wave. Unfortunately, because of that, when COVID came and everyone got new equipment as far as Teams and Zoom's concerned, our equipment is now like on the edge of being a little bit old, so it's around 10 years of age. So approximately about $37,000, we can upgrade all the equipment here. We can make, instead of these table mics, we can make them cordless. And then it doesn't matter whether it's a horseshoe shape, which would be council meetings set on this side, or if it just breaks up into those mics can go where they want to. These are cordless already. The screen, we have issues with people bringing in their own devices and connecting, because it really basically connected by those hard wires. It would turn into a TV screen, and it would be a large TV screen and be plug and play. So we would get rid of some of those issues that we've had previously with compatibility of different devices, and we'd get rid of the projector, because that would be replaced by that. So even though we started off with quite a material amount, over nearly $70,000 will be able to be covered by budgets that we actually have.
Existing budgets.
Yep, and then we would be looking at, so we would go out to tender on any possible requirements and changing, like an airspace, airlock and a door here. And obviously, when we normally go out to those type of projects, people come back and say, I have yet thought of doing it a little bit different. So we'll take that into consideration. And because of the current timing, we're basically in April, by the time we get some specs to do some initial drawings and go out to tender, there'll be a new financial year anyway. So there's no adjustment to this financial year, and we'd look at financing that in the new financial year.
So other considerations, one of the others, sorry, I should have mentioned, like, could be a gallery space as well, in here. It gives it multiple uses if we have flexibility rather than a large table right in the middle.
Like art gallery.
Yeah, our gallery, or for exhibitions and those things as well. Sorry?
In council meeting gallery.
And a gallery for council meeting as well. Greater flexibility with that.
Frigga has a pool fence, so it's got their public getting to their little members.
So we'll have a
Pool
full fence down
yeah,
here.
yeah.
There'll be a lap pool just on that side. So, and that's, sorry, one of the things I should have mentioned, from a risk perspective, having gallery around outside of elected members and staff is not ideal. Where at Canberra, you know, we would have it down the end, but it's still a small meeting room. Never heard of the full fence one, but
Yeah.
clearly the city of Bunbury had some serious issues
Yeah.
where there was police and harassment and people following people to cars,
So-
filming them and stuff.
Yeah, so there'd be segregation where we would have a U shape here. So basically, that would nearly be the void where it is, and the table would go around there, finishing approximately about halfway down, and then the gallery would be up against that wall.
We'd electrify that pool fence during the process. Just joking. Anyone who's watching. Other considerations, the key Canberra meeting room, which Clive has mentioned, if we wanted to make that multi-use from an emergency exit perspective, that's around $7,000. Would be a very simple entry exit door. Again, we don't have to do this, but we're just proposing that. One of the issues is depending on the size of the gallery. This is a sort of restrictive room. Canberra is not that much bigger, but if we knew there was going to be a significant gallery, for example, we could make a decision on where we host the meeting as well, to make sure that we're managing risk from that perspective. From a safety perspective, obviously, there's police in the hospital here. We get criticised on, not we, but the police station's never open, I think, because they're out patrolling. But obviously, if there was an issue, that we would be able to access police and hospital if required. Well, and I think the key thing, obviously, when we talk about budget, and we're very mindful of not spending money if we don't have to. We've had some concepts proposed. We would absolutely be committed to minimising the costs and delivering the project as cost effectively as possible. And if there was smarter solutions that didn't require the projected expenditure, then we'd be looking at as well, whether that's through the IT or the design or the construction as well. One of the other questions has been, there's been other building maintenance projects that haven't come to council. It hasn't been a decision of council. And some of those items were, because they were already in the existing budgets. So an existing budget could be allocated to those projects, which Clive's now positioned that we could do that with our current budget, because it's the end of the financial year and we know what we have spent and not spent. And so then we would for the difference of the project, once we tendered it, we would include a allocation in the new financial year's budget as well. And that's where council would approve the expenditure of that funding. So we could do the IT, Clive, say the carpets, the cupboards, and general stuff like that, the chairs and the repainting with the existing budget because of savings that we've made over this financial year. So yeah, just want to reiterate that commitment to deliver the project cost effectively, make sure that we're passing the pub test as required. For discussion.
Can I just ask a question? In the original information that was sent out, it talked about
Report.
that it's referred to access to toilets and the like. So one of the things I was going to suggest might be considered is rather than putting a window there, putting a door so that there would be the possibility with extra doors in the corridors of actually having access. You hire this room, you can get to the kitchen that way, and then through there you can get to the toilet if there were extra doors in the corridor.
Yes. So we could secure the other door. We would probably suggest using the leisure centre toilets.
I know you
for
said that, but I just think that that's not probably very appealing.
Can we not to go to one of our meeting and need a toilet? If we're looking at minimising.
I think access to the kitchen is something that should be considered. We've talked about putting a window there, which will be slidable maybe and a little bit more soundproof, but that doesn't provide access to that. So we could consider that if we do want to hire it out and do want access to the kitchen.
Yeah.
On the front on the other door.
Is there much calling for people wanting to buy the council's rooms?
There has been in the past, but because we've shut that down, we pretty much shut it down when COVID came, and we've said no. But we don't promote it or market it as well. People are always looking for facilities.
Yeah, they are.
At the moment, there's the barn, there's Victoria, the Youth Fleet Club, the Lions Club. So I can't tell you that there's going to be market. We're going to make $20,000 a year, or we're going to be able to service 20 community meetings. But it just creates an opportunity for it to be multi-use if and as required, which, from the council perspective, that's what we should be doing
Yes.
as well.
Especially when I use community funds.
Yeah.
Make it that they're trying to encourage the use and have people come to their council office that they're paying for and use them.
Yeah, and Australia Day citizenship, Australia Day ceremonies for citizenship ceremonies, and all has private access to the staff office.
And at the moment, they're set up so strangely. I might be on came to the Australia Day, like we had seats all out this way because we had to fit 30 people in the room. So look, I'm fully supportive. Like you said, minimising the cost of rate, they're doing it cost efficiently, we have to, this is a principal office. Crying out loud, it should be fit for purpose to have the public in here, and at the moment it's not. We had the grants commission meeting where we had people all lined up that side and that side. And, yeah.
When I recently went to a meeting at the Coorong Council, they had individual setups that were for each council person, I guess. It was easy to move around, that they could be flushed against the sides of the walls when they wanted to just have it as an open space. And it did feel like it was more conducive to it having a bit more movement and flexibility than a long boardroom table is in such a small room for when you do want to have access to community. So I think it's good. Think about breaking this up.
Yeah, my preference would have been thought about whenever, but it wasn't. And you know, when you see, I think Coorong's a new facility as well,
Yeah.
is it not, Georgia?
Fairly new, yeah, it's nice.
I thought about it.
And you know, I've gone around other chambers and the setup is much better. But also we've got to manage the cost versus, you know, delivery, what we need to
Do
do.
what we've got here.
Yeah, but I quite like the potential concept of not being permanent as well, so you've got flexibility to move around and have it for.
And just on the costs that you were talking about, Clive, some of those costs, regardless of where if we were having a meeting with like the IT and stuff, they would have costs we would have had. They were costs we had to incur anyway
Yeah,
because of upgrading stuff.
Yeah, so the IT here is it's around about 10 years. And it's probably it's probably done. It was done when it was suitable when it was done. It's probably not conducive to like current devices and things like that. So if you were going to rent the room out, you want it basically to be very simplistic for people to come and use it without any issues as well. So so basically it's near the end of its life anyway. So we can it's basically the projector will start failing and a few other things, and it's messy in the way we do it with our cables and things like that as well. So it's as far as IT and like the lifespan of a piece of IT equipment, it's probably one of the longest pieces of IT we've got here at the moment.
Just clarify for a moment. If we would need to make changes, if it was say Canberra or as well.
Yeah.
Again, for the flexibility issue that we've talked about. So then it changes the IT requirements. Having, as I think, I'm sure with Georgia or Victoria, having a big boardroom table in the middle is not the ideal setup. And so we've looked at changing that.
And technology's changed, so now they have cordless spikes and things like that, where, even 3 or 4 years ago, that wasn't available. So we can buy the latest technology, and it doesn't matter how we move our tables, whether it's a big loop or an oval or a U shape, it's going to be able to work so much easier.
We could all have a mobile nursing station on.
Our IT equipment that's still working, can that be offered to community groups? Something at a hall could end up with that, have a movie theatre or something like that.
Oh,
Just to
yeah,
make sure
like
it's not wasted.
things such as the digital projector.
We would repurpose what we could.
Yeah, and a potential, say, like a boardroom table like this could be valuable to someone else, to be resold or something that could help us recoup some money of like our upgrades. I mean, there's still a great board table for somewhere, that's not us, but.
Yeah, as we've got a policy, and if it's a kind of a material asset which looks like it could be used by the community, our policy says that we'll offer it to the community and then see who wants to take those models.
So are there any questions, concerns, feedback?
It's just, this is a lot of money spending on like a room. I just don't know how the community is going to take this with us spending all this money on a meeting room when we're cutting a lot of facilities and stuff. I just think they're just going to go off their tree. When they see the amount of money that we're spending on this meeting room, when we're cutting other stuff, but we're okay to spend 100 grand on a meeting room for council, I just.
What does council?
Don't know how we
have
justify it.
meetings? Like, that's the one thing we do, and I just think we need to have a fit for purpose public group meetings.
I thought we had a good room in Canberra,
But we
and
use
we get
this,
more people in Canberra in gallery when we had meetings there.
or we use this
it's
for
separate.
Australia Day awards, ceremonies, grants, commissions, like we have to. Even if we move the meeting, this is still not fit for purpose for any public meetings that we have. It's dangerous.
Still, it's not gonna go down well,
And I
there's
think
gonna be a lot of.
It may well be. I think what will offset some of that, I'm hoping, is when we start to get some progress with the building review and the land review, start selling land, starts, bringing money in for assets that we don't use, that aren't used, and then we can see some recovery. Also, I think, there's been a lot of recovery when we come to looking at the next long-term financial plan. I mean, the difference between the original, as you said, Mandy, original long-term financial plan when we started and the one now, the forecast back then of 17 million by the end of the long-term financial decade, and the loans are nothing like that. It's nothing like what we're forecasting now. So I think what we need to do is sell more what we are achieving. I think we've been very silent on that. I'm not quite sure how we go about getting those messages out more. I know
Watch this
you're,
space, I think the new rate notice has got a little bit about that, because we're concerned about people not understanding at that level of thing.
Yeah.
But for me, I mean, the finance report today said we've saved 900,000 in wages, so we're just putting some of that wage, for me, as long as it's come from a saving and we're not making more, not putting a rate rise to get.
We're not
this
taking
office
out a loan
revenue,
to do it.
Make it
Yeah.
perfect. We've just done a retaining wall out the side, that hasn't come to council, no one's questioning how much that costs, like it's turning something into fit for purpose, it just that's council's role.
and I think facilities like this can be can be corporate hires as well.
Yeah.
Not as well as council, but corporate hires for a decent modern facility. That will happen.
Yeah, I mean, use it for tractors. LGA company for me.
Yeah.
So the question I had, as we've pointed out, that there could be some allocation. We're absolutely committed to reduce the cost as much as we can to deliver a fit for purpose facility for the community and for council's needs. We can deliver some of that within existing budgets from savings, Clive, that we've made this year. So it's not new money, it's money that we haven't expended. But at that moment, there's a portion that would still need to go into the budget. We're looking for some feedback from the council because we don't want to go down a path and have carpet gone and cupboards gone and new stuff, but then we aren't able to facilitate the whole project. So
Look, I can see, after finding the money in the building maintenance and the IT, that basically the cupboards will be taken out, the carpet redone, obviously the painting redone, because the cupboards will take out the furniture and the IT, and you've done stage one, and you're all within the budget. So, I think the improvements of the room can be done without any budget adjustments of this financial year, and we can actually have an improvement straight away. And then the consideration later is the next step.
It's a very operational issue. You didn't come to us when that needed carpeting outside the stores there, just.
it is, but it's about the budget allocation that we need. But I just want to reiterate that that's from budget savings that have been made from an operational perspective this year.
Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Schultz.
So I did get this right, 100,000 total costs, and first, or just
150.
150, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that was picture. So in reality, you're looking at about, 90,000.
80.
80 with your two lots of your 32 and your 37, which are already in the budget. That I agree with Jan that there will be some community comment on that expenditure. And it won't be positive. But I mean, see, on the other hand, well, the door, we've got to have two doors in both chambers anyway. That's a given. That doesn't even come into it. And it's sort of, the longer you leave it, the more expensive it's going to be. Yeah, but I'm still a bit concerned about the.
People question everything that we do.
So we talk about fit for purpose, I mean, what about the 12 or 13 year wait we've had just trying to get plumbing in Pendle's tea rooms? So we can make that fit for purpose. And Teresa could hire that out 5 days a week. But she can't because people not even allowed to go and wash their hands in the basin because the water doesn't go anything.
But we've got that allocation from the downer that we talked about.
Yeah, but even that's got to go through a process of,
Sure, but
there
it's,
might be, somebody might say there's another program.
well,
project.
precisely, and that's up to the community, I
I
guess.
mean, if we're talking about money left in building maintenance, it's not being used. Why hasn't it been used previously up there to do that building?
Yep, so there's a proposal and a business case and projected costs for that issue being developed now.
But I don't mean to be rude, but I've heard that story over multiple years, multiple CEOs.
Yeah.
And it's just still the same today.
That's council's decision, council wise, so, yeah, I take your point. But council, the one said, yeah, will make a decision on where to allocate their funding.
But then again, I do agree this room needs an upgrade or, like the others have said, I mean, what are the ratepayers gonna say when they want a footpath so the elderly don't fall over? I mean, there's so many scenarios. You could be here 3 days. and talk about
To
this.
me, we've made $900,000 savings this year alone in staff. The money is there to do a fit for purpose of it. So it should be number one priority. I mean, Ben will go to jail if somebody gets attacked in a council meeting and he hasn't done these upgrades. It's an occupational health and safety risk.
And I guess as well, since what happened in Onkaparinga Council, like in our early days of our first term here, like, so, I mean, that had never happened before. It was a very scary situation for that council, and that pretty much put everyone else and all the councils in this state on some crazy high alert feeling of how safe are our council chambers. Turns out we're not.
If
And
that
so
didn't happen, we wouldn't be having.
we wouldn't be having this discussion, exactly. So things evolve in time that then make you realise, oh, hang on, we haven't really thought this through, or the previous people who built this didn't think about all those safety concerns we now need to have for these spaces based on that one incident that was really scary for those elected members. So I think it's like all of the LGAs would be thinking, all of the council areas would be thinking the same thing, you know, because of that. It's triggered. If we didn't have that trigger, we would be thinking this is fine. And so if we explain and give that education to our community a little bit around it as well, that we didn't just say, hey, let's go to Mannum and let's make this place gorgeous and update it all and make it fancy. It's not about us wanting it fancy. It's, I don't care about the carpet, but, you know, it's about making it safe. And it's just about a safety issue that's been raised now and created a kind of a red flag for all of our councils. And I think we've got to move on it now as opposed to waiting, because the cost of things are only going up. And when we put off anything, it's only going to cost 200,000, 300,000 in years to come, you know?
And look, devil's advocate, like we've met here for a while, a year, I think it is, and we've had no issues. But it's the one issue that we do have. And it's not just for council meetings, it could be for the citizenship ceremony. And yes, we could hold them. So to Simone's point, my responsibility is to mitigate risk. And so, you know, we've done things from a staff perspective where they are on the other side of the building, or they can work from home or remotely on a day like today, or they can do that with the citizenship ceremony. So we've got to mitigate risks and consider that as well. So,
We could also use the Mannum Institute for citizenship ceremonies and stuff in that other space there.
so that's a
that we hired out.
mitigation, you know, consideration subject to where we land on.
And my question is also around this is when we do get going on it, or when it starts to happen, how much that's going to disrupt our council meetings that we hold here? Would we be having to do, like, obviously it would take a while for whatever works
We would
to be
consider
done.
that as part of the project plan.
Yeah, okay, that we'd still have access while the work's.
We can move council meetings. So in the old days before COVID, we were
Yeah.
doing 2 meetings.
All over, yeah, so we
Areas
just
of one
rotate.
branch down, but it's because of all this IT now and stuff.
Yeah, we didn't live stream and or record, even though we don't have to live stream, but we do record.
Very transparent.
But I'm mindful of time. Is there anyone else that hasn't spoken, would like to say anything, or is there any other feedback on this?
I just think that fixing up a historical oversight for whatever reason that happened, and that's something that we've carried over. And now that we're aware of it, we can't just close these doors and just go, well, this space is dead to us. You know, that's not an option either. The community maybe don't want money spent, but if we close this off and say, well, we're not using this, I bet we would have a bigger outcry for whatever reasons. And I think the fact that we're going to make it fit for purpose in the most economical way, and then also the potential of having it maximised for use for hire, all those sort of things. And,
Yeah, recoup some
yeah,
of the money.
yeah, I think that's a good thing to do.
Anyone else?
I have one question. Does that money, does that include the Canberra, getting an extra door in the Canberra?
Extra $7,000, so 159, I think 152 is it by, I think that.
So, yeah, about $31,500 to include the Canberra can come out of our building maintenance, yeah.
And Councillor has that, included 20% contingency as well, and so it's worst case scenario, I suppose, and doesn't include any savings that we could identify through the process. All right, thank you for the discussion and the feedback. We'll move on to the next item, which is on my other agenda, behavioural standards. This will only be a quick discussion. Just want to highlight. So you would remember that in 2022, there's legislative change to the Local Government Act, including employment, council behavioural standards, which we went through the process, and there's now a panel, and the process is different to try to help councillors get on and deal with issues. And there was a consideration of employee behavioural standards as well. And in the Act, I think it's 128, it talks about council may have employee behavioural standards. We've got a current code of conduct, which needs to be reviewed and is getting reviewed at the moment as part of our policy review. But council could replace that with a employee behavioural standards. And council, that went to council. I'm gonna 23, May 23, and council made a decision that they wouldn't have employee behavioural standards from a council perspective, that the responsibility for employees is the CEO's remit. And so that we would have a operational code of conduct that deals with employee issues. It's just been raised about that part of the process, and to make sure that we are compliant with the legislation, and because council did consider it back in May 23 and made that decision, then we are compliant. We just need to update our current code of conduct. So we do have a code of conduct for employee behaviour. It's just needs to be reviewed. So just wanted to raise that. Any questions? That had come up. No?
Yep.
All right. On the home stretch, I promise we might go into confidence now. So David, will you be able to close the door? Unless anyone's in the kitchen and no, just that. It's fine.